Hi everybody, good morning, welcome. My name is Frances and I'm coming to you from Zenyasa.com. I'm here to show you today a few elements that will be very helpful in developing and building better balance. This should be helpful and useful for both students who are very challenged with their balance and also advanced students who want to work on more challenging asanas to improve their inversion practice. So we're going to focus on today 3 elements that can greatly help your balance and build better balance. The first element will be alignment and finding muscular balance to support that alignment. The second will be to work to strengthen the core. The deep core is very important in helping support you in your balance. The third, we're going to focus on proprioception. So this, we can think of the proprioceptors in your feet, right? So there are movements that happen that help you come to your center in your balance. There are also the eyes and the ears can be involved, so we'll cover a few things that are related to that as well. The first thing let's do is just talk a little bit about alignment. We can think of the body in spheres, and this is an easy way to help us get an idea of what we're looking for. Very common to have the head be forward if we're at the computer a lot or driving. So it's very important to stack up your large bony structures, your head, your rib cage, and your pelvis. We could think of as spheres. So your head sphere stacked up over your rib sphere, stacked up over your pelvic sphere. If you have tightness in the hip flexors in the front of the body, you might find that tightness pulls you into a little bit of a pelvic tilt, as if your pelvis was a bowl. It would be like spilling water out of the front of your pelvic bowl. Your knees might bend to compensate, right? You might sort of curve over. If you're dealing with using a walker or a cane or something like this, you might be even more encouraged to sort of fall into this kind of alignment. And that kind of tightness can present, or the tightness can be there first and then pull you into that alignment as well. So the first thing we want to do is we want to stack our spheres, our head sphere over our rib sphere over our pelvic sphere. A little more investigation could be useful in figuring out what muscles are tight, what muscles are weak. It's very common to have imbalance in the body, and if balance is a problem in itself, then imbalance in the musculature. If you work to find better muscular balance from front to back, and the muscles around the hip area especially, then that can be very helpful in supporting the balance. Our second point that we want to look to is strengthening and supporting the core. So we'll do a little bit of specific work to help you get more connected to the core first. We'll start just by coming down. You can come onto your back. And we're just going to see if we can get connected to the abdominals. So you'll start by pressing the low back into the floor from pulling your abdominals in. And then you can just see if you can get a sense for using those muscles in a sort of pulling in action. And then we'll reverse that curve and make space between the low back and the floor. Right, so we talked about finding muscular balance in our alignment, right, to help our alignment. And we want to find the middle of those 2 places ultimately, right, with the pelvis. We don't want to be spilling water out of the front of our pelvic bowl if we were standing or the other way, right? But when we're lying on the floor, we can press our low back into the floor for a moment just to get connected to those muscles. It's an easy access for connection to the abdominals. So as you press your low back into the floor, pull the belly in to do so. And you can see if you can start to feel those muscles. We'll do simple sit-up, arms lifted off the floor, and you'll reach your hands long towards your feet, right? Keep pulling the abdominals in. You're going to reach the hands toward the feet, and then take 4 counts to come down, coming down in 4, all the while pulling the abdominals in 3, 2, and 1, and again coming up 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and coming down 4, and 3, and 2, and 1. Let's do one more like that. Belly pulling in, right? Coming up 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and coming down 4, and 3, and 2, and 1. Now, if you feel very disconnected from your abdominals, this is a good way to start. So if you press your low back into the floor, you can start to feel, gosh, am I pulling in, am I pushing out? And you can look and see, am I pushing my abdominals out, right? That might be something that happens for you. So if you're working more advanced, you can make that rocking action in the pelvis, make it smaller and smaller, and you can find about the middle place between the low back pressing into the floor and the low back arching as much as it can. When you find that middle place, you can find your hip points, the bones in the front of the pelvis that kind of are close to the surface. Put your thumbs on your hip points and lift your head and look to see if the hip points and the pubic bone are in the same plane. That's a neutral alignment for the pelvis. All right, most of us tend to be in a little bit of a tuck like this. So you'll see a flattening of the hip creases here. And if you see that if your thumbs are on your hip points, your pubic bone is higher, you can drop your pubic bone and your tailbone toward the floor. Right? A little bit, a little bit, a little bit until you find level. And you might notice that your back feels like it wants to grip. Right? Resist that. Right? If it does feel like it wants to grip, hold there for a few seconds, maybe about 10 seconds. And then just relax the back muscles as much as you can. Now, if you're okay to do that, then we can go on to connecting the deep core from here. If you still feel your back muscles gripping, then you have to relax out of the alignment a little bit and gradually work your way there. If you're okay in that neutral, the back muscles are relaxed, you can reach your hands back there and kind of feel if you feel a strong cord on either side of your spine, right? That's actually a gripping in the back. You want to relax that. Right? So once you find that, then we'll go for our deep core muscles, and three that we'll focus on. Number 1 is the pelvic floor, muscles between the sitting bones, the pubic bone, and the tailbone, right at the base of the pelvis, pulling in and up toward your head. So you're going to squeeze the pelvic floor muscles. It's a very small action, just as though you had to use the restroom, but you had to hold it. Okay? So just try to isolate that. Squeezing the pelvic floor is number 1 of the deep core muscles. Number 2, your deep transverse abdominals, you could think of like a corset around your low torso. Here's where most people have a little bit of trouble. Once you engage the pelvic floor, when you go to engage the transverse abdominals, the deep abdominals, a lot of times it will be tempting to just push your low back into the floor. But you don't actually want to do that. Remember, we want to work our way toward a neutral if your body's ready. Right? If you're okay to do transverse abdominals, the pelvic floor muscles support the engagement of the transverse abdominals. They're all connected. So pelvic floor is 1, transverse abdominals 2. Remember, if you're gripping, you have to take another strategy and release. Right? But if you're okay there, transverse abdominals is number 2. Number 3, you're going to get tall. Imagine that someone had their hand on the top of your head and you could push your hand into your head into their hand. You're going to be engaging the deep spinal muscles. Rotatories and multifidi are some of those. And so when you lengthen, you energetically lengthen through your torso, and we do this all the time in yoga, you're going to engage those deep spinal muscles. Okay? So those 3 connections can be very helpful. Okay? Now go ahead and release all of that, and we're just going to find those same connections briefly. Number 1, pelvic floor, so you can squeeze right now. Number 2, transverse abdominals. And number 3, you're going to lengthen, right? See if you can visualize those deep spinal muscles hugging to the spine, or I like to think sometimes of like a visual aid, like a lightsaber from Star Wars. And you can think of that energized action through the spine, right? And then we could do a little bit of work for stability here. You can challenge your balance. So you can do arms alongside the body. And this Pilates move, you lengthen the leg up, laterally rotate the thigh bone from the hip socket, and start to circle the leg. Now, I like to keep the bottom knee bent at first for a little more stability. If you're working advanced, you can straighten the bottom leg. Now, you'll notice your hips will try to rock side to side. You want to stabilize, right? And keep the hips still. Right? So this is leg circles. This is a simple Pilates exercise. You can do a few in each direction. And then you can try the other side. So release everything for a second. Engage the pelvic floor, transverse abdominals, long spine. And then do left leg up, laterally rotate, crossing the midline first. Remember, it's more stable if you keep your bottom foot on the floor. The classic variation is to have the bottom leg long. It's harder to keep the hips quiet though. So depending on if you're working more beginning or advanced, then you can, and we'll reverse directions, you can try one, you could try the other. Okay, so that's a simple exercise. Now, you're going to keep working to quiet those hips. They might not be that still at first. Now, you just want to watch that they're not really moving, right? And you really do your best to keep still. And that's how you're going to start to cultivate some of that core strength. Now, let's try another one for core strength. We're going to come onto all fours. You're going to pull your abdominals in. Think of that corset around your low torso. And engaging those abdominal muscles, deep transverse abdominals, is like that corset or weight belt getting tighter and tighter. And we're just going to, from all fours, keep those abdominals engaged, reach your right arm forward. Now for some of us, this will be enough. That's okay. You want to just work, keep breathing, engage your core. Now another variation you can do is you can start with the left foot back onto the ball of the foot, engage the quadricep, the lower quads engaged to keep that leg straight. Energize that leg strongly. That strong energy is going to help you with your balance, believe it or not, in inversions. Energy through the body. So you can start with that back leg straight, belly firm, and then you can reach the opposite arm forward. If you're working a little more advanced, you can lift the back leg up. Remember, you want to have energy and action through the body, and that will help you in your more advanced inversions. And you can hold for about 30 seconds. And then once you've done that, you can come down and switch. So you have your choice, either one arm. You could also do one leg and holding there. Or you can do one arm, back foot, ball of the foot on the floor. Or you can do one arm forward and one leg back. If you're working more advanced, you can start to do sunbird, knee to elbow, and then arm and leg reach out. And exhale as you close, and inhale as you reach out. Exhale, close, and inhale, reach. And let's do one more like that. Exhale, close, and inhale, reach, and other side. One arm forward, one leg back. Remember, this is if you're working more advanced, you're working the core, elbow to knee, arm and leg reach. You can train your back leg to actively energize straight. Exhale, and inhale, and exhale, and inhale. So there's a few exercises that can help you work with your core strength. We did Pilates leg circles, and then we did, as we do in Vinyasa Yoga, we do sunbird, knee and elbow coming together. So we'll do, let's see. Let's take a moment, maybe just choose one more exercise for the core, very specifically. Let's do one of my favorites. So what we'll do is you'll come onto your back, and I'm going to have you specifically press your low back into the floor. You have your choice here. You can keep your feet on the floor, bring your hands back to cradle the head. You can lift the head, neck, and shoulders up, and we'll reach your right elbow across towards your left knee, and then come back to center. And then left elbow across, and center. Now you're working to pull the abdominals in here as well. If you're working more advanced, we have two other options. So you have the classic Pilates crisscross. You'll do right elbow reaching across to your left knee, and then switch, and switch, and switch. Exhale as you switch, and now I'm going to have you specifically press your low back into the floor still. If you want even more challenge, you can bring the legs to tabletop position, thighs perpendicular to the floor. Belly is still pulling in like crazy. And a variation on crisscross, right elbow crossing toward the left knee, but you'll keep the left knee in place and straighten the right leg on a 45-degree angle. You can press through the heel with a flexed foot and squeeze that leg straight, again training the straightness of that long leg. And then coming back through center to tabletop again, and then switch, and center, and center, and center, and center. Let's do one more time, each side, and center, and release. Okay. So those are a few exercises that you can use to help develop more core strength. Remember, if you feel like you need to rest, definitely do. Always listen to your body, and you can gradually build your strength up over time. Let's move now to our proprioception exercises. So we'll do a few things that will train our balance specifically. You'll start with picking your stance. So there are 5 stances that we'll do. Feet roughly hip width apart is stance number 1. Step back to this. Stance number 2, you would have 1 foot forward as though you had just taken a step. So that's just 1 foot forward, stance number 2. And these get more challenging as you go. The third challenge would be, instead of having 1 foot directly forward as though you're just taking a step, to step that foot right in front of the other as though you're on a tightrope. And you'll feel that's going to challenge the balance a little bit more. To make it even more challenging, you have the next variation, variation number 4, which would be to bring the heel and toe together. So this essentially makes your base of support smaller, which is going to make for more challenge. I'm feeling it right now. Now, the 5th variation, and most challenging, of course, would be to stand on 1 foot and then to lift the opposite knee. So you can do that as well. Okay, so just to review those stances one more time. So you have hip width distance. You have 1 foot stepping forward would be number 2. Number 3, stepping 1 foot in front of the other. Next, heel to toe, more challenging. And the final variation would be to lift 1 leg. So with whatever stance you've chosen, we'll do a few different arm variations. And you can feel as you're doing these, again, if you keep practicing, you can start to develop your stances. You start at stance number 1, maybe in a few weeks you do stance number 2, and you gradually progress further and further until you're doing these all on 1 leg. We'll start with hip width stance. The first thing you might do is just simply raise your arms overhead.